He looked at her, she looked at him. No fear in her glowing eyes, only defiance together. They had survived the first wave, but the true battle was just beginning. The stars outside the ship glowed with silent fire. Joran sat tense in the pilot's chair, watching as the scanner filled with red dots 1, 2, 10, 20. Too many. They were surrounded. The raiders had come. Hungry and merciless. The first blast shook the Wanderer like a toy. Panels sparked, alarms screamed, and the engines roared with pain. Joran gritted his teeth, forcing the old ship to hold together. But he knew the truth. His ship was a freighter. Not a fighter against so many enemies, he had no chance. The woman, this exile, stood behind him. Her eyes glowing like cold suns, she leaned forward. Placing her hand on the control panel, the metal pulsed under her touch. Lights flickered. Systems came alive. "Don't," Joran started, but the words died in his throat. The ship responded to her as if she was part of it, as if the Wanderer had been waiting for her. Outside, the raiders closed in, their ship sleek and sharp. Painted with blood-red symbols, their voices crackled through the comm, filled with laughter and threats. "Human ship, surrender your cargo. Surrender the alien or be destroyed." Joran spat. "They know about you," he whispered. Looking at her, the exile only stared, her jaw tight, her skin glowing brighter with every word the raider spoke. The first wave fired, streams of energy cutting across the void. The shields flared, but too weak. They would not last long. Joran grabbed the manual guns, fingers flying across the triggers. Bolts of fire spat from the ship, but he missed more than he hit. His hands shook, his aim weak. The raiders laughed again, circling closer, like wolves around wounded prey. Then she moved. Her glowing fingers slid across the console, symbols of light blooming wherever she touched. The ship shifted, fast, sharper than Joran had ever flown. The guns locked onto targets without hesitation. When Joran fired, the shots hit perfectly. One raider exploded, then another. The laughter stopped, replaced with curses and anger. Joran's heart pounded. He glanced at her. She was standing tall now, her skin alive with streams of blue light. The ship obeyed her faster, stronger, as though it trusted her more than it trusted him. He could hardly believe it. "You're inside the ship," he muttered. "You're part of it." Her eyes flicked to him, but she did not speak. Instead, she raised her hand, and the shields brightened like a rising star. The next volley from the raiders bounced harmlessly away. She turned her focus back to the controls, driving the ship like it was her own body. The raiders began to panic. Their commander barked orders, forcing them to swarm. Dozens of ships rushed forward, firing in wild desperation. Joran fought to keep up, pulling the triggers, steering where he could, but she was the true pilot now. Her will flowed through the ship. Every movement smooth, every strike perfect. Still, the numbers were too great for every enemy they destroyed. 3 more took its place. The ship shook. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Oxygen alarms blared. Joran's eyes burned from smoke. "This can't last," he coughed. "We'll be torn apart," the exile staggered, her glow flickering like a fading flame. But she did not stop. Her hands pressed harder into the panel, symbols of light wrapped around her arms, spiraling toward her chest. She whispered something in her own language. Sharp and melodic, the ship answered, roaring with sudden power. Energy surged from the Wanderer like a living wave. It blasted through the raiders. Shattering their formation, 3 ships burned at once. Debris scattering across the stars, the others broke off, their commanders shouting in confusion. Joran sat frozen, staring at the display. "What did you just do?" he whispered. The exile collapsed into the co-pilot's chair. Breathing hard, her skin dimming, Joran caught her before she fell, her weight surprisingly light. She opened her glowing eyes just enough to meet his, and with a weak voice, she repeated the only word she had given him before. "Exile." Joran's stomach twisted. Exiled for this? For this power? If her people had cast her away, what kind of empire did they rule? And why did raiders risk so much just to capture her? He looked at the wreckage outside, floating silently in the void. The scanner still blinked red, though fewer dots remained. The enemy had pulled back, regrouping. But they would return stronger. This battle was not over. The woman gripped his arm with cold fingers. Her eyes burned into his. She traced a symbol in the air, glowing faintly. It was a star surrounded by chains breaking apart. Her meaning was clear. She was hunted because she carried something her people feared. Something that could shatter an empire. Joran's heart pounded. His life had been simple before, lonely but simple. Now it was tangled in fire and danger. And yet as he looked at her, he felt no regret. He had spent his last credits on clothes for a frozen stranger. But in doing so, he had bought more than trouble. He had bought a story larger than himself. The comm crackled again, the enemy commander's voice sharp and furious. You cannot hide her, human. She belongs to us. Joran clenched his jaw. Looking at the exile, her eyes met his, steady, unyielding. No, Joran growled. She doesn't belong to anyone. Outside, the enemy fleet formed again, surrounding them like a storm. The exile's glow flared once more, weak but determined. She lifted her hand toward the controls, ready to fight, and Joran gripped the triggers, ready to stand beside her. Together they faced the darkness. Together they prepared for the impossible. The void outside was quiet again, but it was the kind of quiet that came only before a storm. The raiders had pulled back. Yet Joran knew they would return, and not alone. No small band risked so much for nothing, not unless someone powerful commanded them inside the Wanderer. The cabin smelled of smoke and burned circuits. Panels flickered, sparks still hissed from broken wires. Joran wiped sweat from his brow, staring at the woman who had saved his ship. She sat slumped in the co-pilot's chair, her glow fading, her chest rising with shallow breaths. For the first time since thawing, she looked fragile, almost breakable. Joran knelt beside her, his voice low. Why are they after you? Who are you, really? Her glowing eyes opened slowly, unfocused but steady. She touched her chest with trembling fingers and whispered the word again. Exile. The word was too small, too empty. Joran slammed his fist against the console, frustration biting through his exhaustion. That doesn't tell me anything, he snapped. Exile from what? Exile for what? Why risk my ship, my life, if I don't even know who you are? Her gaze did not waver. Instead, faint light bled from her skin. Spreading across the floor, the glow twisted into shapes, forming images that hovered in the air like ghosts. Joran froze, watching the silent vision unfold. He saw tall figures, beings like her, wrapped in glowing robes. Standing in a circle, they raised their hands, and chains of light bound a single figure. Her. The exile struggled, but their judgment was final. Her people lowered her into the freezing pod, her eyes burning with anger and sorrow. Then the vision shattered into smoke, leaving only her faint whisper. Truth, Joran swallowed hard, his throat dry. You were exiled because you knew something. Something they wanted hidden. She nodded weakly, her fingers tracing another symbol on the wall. This time it was a sun feeding on smaller stars, draining their light until they went dark. The meaning struck him like a blade. Her people fed on others, entire worlds perhaps, and she had discovered it when she tried to speak. They silenced her. Joran leaned back, shaking his head. It was too big, too heavy for one small ship, but the weight of it pressed against him all the same. You're telling me your empire survives by destroying others, he muttered, and they'll kill anyone who tries to reveal it. The exile's eyes closed, but her silence was answer enough before Joran could speak again. The ship groaned, alarms flickered to life. The fuel gauge was nearly empty. The last battle had drained more than he realized. The Wanderer drifted toward the orbit of a barren moon. Its surface scarred and gray. If they landed, they might never leave again. But it was the only choice left. The ship touched down hard, throwing sparks across the cabin. Dust swallowed the windows and silence returned. Joran cursed under his breath, running checks. Engines half dead, fuel gone, weapons fried, he muttered. We're stranded. The exile stirred, her eyes glowing faintly once more. She placed her hand against the wall as if listening. Then she pointed toward the surface of the moon, her voice breaking but clear. Here, Joran frowned. Here? What's here? It's just rock and dust. She shook her head, her glowing symbols forming in the air. A vault, a door hidden beneath the moon's skin. Guarded and forgotten? Joran narrowed his eyes. You knew about this place. She did not answer. But her silence was enough. Her exile was no accident. She had been sent away to disappear, and yet here on a dead moon, she believed there was something worth finding. Against his better judgment, Joran gathered supplies and opened the hatch. The moon's air was thin and bitter. His suit crackled as dust clung to the glass. The exile walked beside him, steady now, her glow pushing back the shadows. Together they climbed across broken rock until they reached a cliff face. There, half buried in stone, a metallic surface shone faintly. It was not natural, not part of the moon, but built by hands long ago. The exile placed her glowing palm against the wall. The rock trembled, dust falling like rain. Lines of light spread outward, forming the shape of a door. It opened slowly, groaning as if it had not been touched in centuries. Inside was darkness deeper than night. Yet as they stepped through, the walls came alive with pale light. Symbols glowed across the chamber, the same as those on her skin. Joran's breath caught in his throat. "This isn't just a hiding place," he whispered. "This is something bigger." The exile stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the far end of the chamber. There, locked in a cage of crystal, pulsed a core of pure energy. It beat like a heart, glowing with terrible beauty. The exile's body trembled, tears forming in her glowing eyes. She whispered a single word, one Joran could understand. "Proof." Joran stared at the core, his mind racing. If this was what she had discovered, if this was the truth her people feared, then it was no wonder they cast her out. This secret could bring an empire to its knees behind them. The scanner on Joran's wrist blinked red. His heart sank. The raiders, or worse, her people, were already on their way. They had been tracked, followed, hunted here. The storm was about to break, and there was no turning back. Joran looked at her. She looked at him, their eyes meeting in the glow of the hidden core. He knew in that moment he had a choice. Sell her out and maybe survive, or stand with her and defy an empire. The weight of that choice burned in his chest, and though he had no answer yet, he knew the time was running out. The vault door sealed behind them with a heavy echo. Dust drifted through the cold air like ash, and the chamber's light pulsed faintly, as though it had just awakened from a long sleep. Joran tightened his grip on the old blaster at his side. Though he knew it would be useless against the kind of power he had just seen, the exile walked slowly ahead, her glowing skin answering the light on the walls. As if the entire place recognized her, the crystal core in the center of the chamber beat like a heart. Steady and alive, every pulse seemed to shake the ground beneath their feet. Joran's throat tightened as he realized it was not just a power source, it was something more, something alive. The exile placed her palm against the barrier of light around the core, and her lips moved, whispering words in her language. The barrier trembled but did not break. Suddenly, the silence shattered, the ground shook, and the walls cracked open. From the dust, metal shapes unfolded. Crawling out like spiders from a nest, they were machines, tall and thin, their heads shaped like blades, their arms ending in glowing claws. Their single red eyes blinked awake, each one locking onto Joran and the exile. Joran cursed, raising his blaster, firing a desperate shot. The bolt of light struck one machine, but it barely flinched, the wound closing as though the metal healed itself. "Great," he muttered. "They're alive too." The exile stepped forward, her arms glowing brighter. Symbols of light burned across her skin. Flowing into the ground, the machines froze, twitching, as if something inside them resisted her command. But then one broke free, screeching, and the others followed. They lunged, claws sparking, blades slicing through the air. Joran dove aside, firing again and again, but his shots bounced uselessly off their armor. The exile's glow flared, and she raised her hand. A wave of energy burst outward, slamming into the machines, throwing them back. For a moment, the chamber was filled with sparks and smoke. Joran coughed, struggling to breathe through the dust. He glanced at her, her face tight with pain, her body shaking. She had used too much energy in the battle above, and now she was burning what little strength remained. "Stop," he shouted, grabbing her arm. "You'll kill yourself." She looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with both fury and sorrow. Her lips moved, forming a single word in broken trade tongue. "Guardians." Joran's blood ran cold. These machines weren't just defenders, they were guardians of the secret, protectors of the core. If her people had built them, it meant they knew how dangerous this truth was. They had hidden it away and left monsters to ensure it stayed hidden. The machines rose again, damaged but not destroyed. Their claws scraped sparks across the stone floor as they advanced. Joran pulled the exile behind a broken pillar, his voice sharp. "If these things keep coming, we won't last a minute." She closed her eyes, pressing her palm to the ground. The symbols spread outward, glowing like rivers of light. The machines hesitated, their red eyes flickering. Some froze, caught in her grip. Others resisted, clawing their way forward with inhuman determination. Joran took the chance, rolling from cover and firing again. This time his shots hit one in the eye. Bursting the red glow, the machine collapsed, twitching and smoking. "Okay," he breathed. "They can die, The exile's glow dimmed, her body sagging against the pillar. Joran rushed to her side, supporting her with one arm. "We need to move now," he said. Before they reset, together they stumbled toward the core. The barrier still hummed, pulsing with steady power. The exile raised her hand, too weak to push harder. But the core seemed to sense her presence. The barrier cracked, opening just enough for a sliver of light to spill through. The machines screeched in unison, as if the breach enraged them. They surged forward, faster, deadlier. Joran aimed, his blaster glowing hot from overuse. But he knew he couldn't stop them all. He looked at her, his voice rough. "If you've got one last trick, now's the time." Her eyes met his, filled with both fear and determination. She whispered in her language words he could not understand. The symbols on her skin flared one last time. Her body collapsed into his arms as the energy surged into the core. The chamber shook violently, the light exploding outward. The machines screamed, their bodies cracking apart as the surge tore through them. One by one they fell, shattered into pieces, silent at last. Joran shielded his eyes, holding her tightly as the glow faded. When the dust settled, the machines were nothing but wreckage. The chamber was quiet again, except for the steady heartbeat of the core. Joran looked down at her, weak and pale in his arms. "You're going to get me killed," he whispered, though his voice was softer than before. She stirred, her lips forming another broken word. "Proof." Joran stared at the core, its glow reflected in her tired eyes. Proof that her people's empire was built on lies. Proof that entire worlds had been drained dry. Proof worth killing for, worth dying for. But the scanner on his wrist beeped again, sharp and merciless. Joran cursed, seeing the swarm of red dots returning more than before. The raiders had found them, and worse, ships larger than raiders, warships. Her people had come, they were out of time. Joran gritted his teeth, pulling her to her feet. If this proof was real, they had to escape with it. The exile leaned against him, her glow weak but her eyes still burning with fire. Together they turned toward the exit, the wreckage of the Guardians at their backs. The storm outside was waiting and the war was about to begin. The chamber still shook from the collapse of the machines. Dust drifted in pale streams through the glowing light of the core. Joran held the exile close, her body weak against his, but her eyes burning with stubborn fire. The heartbeat of the core echoed through the stone, steady, alive, and dangerous. The scanner on Joran's wrist blinked red again. More signals every second, the raiders were returning. But behind them came something worse. Large signatures organized, too sharp to be pirates. Warships heavy and relentless, the kind that only an empire could send. Her people had found them, Joran cursed under his breath. His chest heavy, he had nothing left, no fuel. No weapons strong enough. No allies, all he had was her, this exile, and the proof she carried in her glowing skin and in the pulsing heart of the core. It was not enough to win, but it was enough to change everything. He looked at her, her head resting against his shoulder, her lips trembling with words she could not speak. "You're asking me to fight an empire," he muttered, "with an old freighter and a half-broken blaster." Her eyes lifted to his, and though her voice was weak, the word came again. Truth. The simplicity of it struck deeper than any argument. Joran had lived his life chasing survival, trading scraps, hiding from danger. But the truth, this truth, was larger than him. Larger than survival. It was something worth more than credits. More than ships, maybe even more than his life. He pulled her gently toward the exit. His voice low but certain. "Then we run with it. And we don't stop." Outside, the moon's barren surface stretched under a sky filled with stars. But those stars were broken by shapes. Dark ships descending. Sharp and merciless, their engines burned like falling suns, their shadows stretching long across the ground. Joran's stomach twisted, the kind of fear that told him he was already dead. But the exile's cold hand tightened around his. Her grip was steady, unyielding, reminding him that fear was not the end. They reached the Wanderer. Scarred and smoking from the last battle, Joran's heart ached at the sight of it. It was barely holding together, but it was all they had. He shoved her inside, sealed the hatch, and rushed to the controls. The engines coughed, stuttered, then roared weakly to life. The ship trembled as if it wanted to give up, but it lifted from the ground. The scanners screamed, red lights filling the display. The raiders had already formed a blockade, circling like vultures behind them. The warships descended, their weapons locking. Joran gripped the controls, sweat dripping down his brow. "No way out," he whispered. "No way through." The exile moved beside him, her body trembling, her skin glowing faintly. She placed her hand on the console and the ship steadied. The engine surged stronger than before. Answering her will, Joran looked at her, his voice sharp. "You'll burn yourself out if you keep doing this." She met his gaze, her eyes calm and certain. One word fell from her lips. "Fight!" Joran let out a broken laugh. He had lived his life running from fights, never picking battles he could not win. But maybe that was why humans mattered in the galaxy. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were the smartest, but because when the odds were impossible, they still fought. He clenched his jaw, his hands steady on the controls. "All right," he said. "Then we fight." The blockade closed in, raider ships firing streams of fire. The Wanderer shook violently, alarms screamed. Panels burst into sparks. Joran dodged, weaving between blasts, his heart racing. The exile's light spread across the ship. Guiding his every move, she was weak, but her will flowed into the vessel, making it faster, sharper, alive. Joran fired the guns, his shot striking with impossible accuracy. One raider fell, then another. The others swarmed, circling tighter. Every hit they landed ripped another scar into the hull. Still, Joran pressed on, teeth clenched, refusing to fall. Then the warships opened fire. The sky burned with beams of energy, brighter than the sun. The shields cracked, the hull screamed. The Wanderer spun under the force. Joran fought the controls, but the ship was breaking apart. The exile pressed her glowing palm against the panel, her body trembling violently. Energy flared from her skin into the ship. The shields blazed back to life, holding for one more strike. Her scream echoed through the cabin, her body collapsing against the seat. Joran caught her before she slid to the floor. Her glow dimmed, flickering like the last light of a dying star. Her lips moved, whispering with effort. "No surrender." Joran's chest burned. His breath ragged, he looked at the scanner. At the endless wall of enemies, no way out, no chance of victory. But maybe it wasn't about victory. Maybe it was about showing the galaxy the truth. No matter the cost, his hands tightened on the controls. His eyes sharp, he whispered back to her, his voice steady despite the storm. Then no surrender. The comm crackled. The voice of the enemy commander filled with cold authority. "Human, give us the exile and you will live." Joran looked at her, her pale face resting against his shoulder, her glow faint but her fire still alive. He leaned toward the comm, his voice steady and defiant. "No." Outside, the enemy warships adjusted their aim. The next volley was coming, the one that would end it. Joran braced, his jaw tight, his heart steady. Whatever happened next, his choice was made. He would not sell her. He would not run, he would fight, and in that choice, he felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. The black sea of space burned with fire. The raider ships circled like wolves, their claws ready to tear behind them. The warships of the Empire loomed, vast and merciless, their cannons glowing like suns. And at the center of it all, the Wanderer shuddered. Small, broken, and defiant, Joran gripped the controls with bleeding hands, his arms heavy but unyielding. Beside him, the exile leaned weakly. Her glow dim, her body close to collapse still. Her hand rested on the console, her will pulsing into the ship, keeping it alive. Her voice was faint but sharp, the single word that held everything. "Fight!" The enemy commander's voice cut through the comm, cold and sure. "Surrender the exile, human, or be erased." Joran spat blood from his lip and growled back. "She's not yours, she's not anyone's." The warships fired, beams of light tearing across the void. The Wanderer twisted, shields flaring, engines screaming, every blast ripped closer. Every dodge cost them another piece of the ship. Still, they moved, fast, sharp. Guided by her fading glow, Joran's blasters spat fire, his aim too weak to matter. But she sharpened it, every shot bent true. Every bolt struck deep. One raider exploded, then another, their wreckage spinning into the black. The others cursed, panicked, their confidence breaking. This was no helpless freighter anymore, it was something more. A human's courage tied to an exile's fire, but the warships closed in. Their shadows vast, their weapons endless. Joran's breath came ragged, his heart heavy. They could not win, not like this. Then the exile lifted her head, her eyes glowing fiercely once more. She pressed her palm to the console, and her symbols blazed across the walls. The ship itself began to glow, the light spilling into the void. Joran's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" Her lips moved, trembling, the words broken but clear. "Truth." Now, the glow surged outward. not as a weapon but as a signal, the core within the vault. The proof of her empire's crime had been linked, and now through her, through the ship it spread, across the comm, across the stars into every channel, every frequency, images of drained worlds, of stolen suns, of an empire feeding on life. Truth carried like fire, impossible to silence. The enemy commander roared, his voice filled with fury. Cut the signal. Destroy them now. But it was too late. The galaxy had seen. And once truth was free, it could not be caged again. The warships fired again, desperate, savage. The Wanderer shuddered under the storm, hull cracking, lights dying. Joran held the controls with everything left in him. His teeth clenched. He refused to fall before the message was carried. Then a new voice cut across the comm. Sharp and defiant, not a raider, not an Imperial. A miner's ship battered and weak. Then another voice, a traitor, then a smuggler. Then a soldier gone rogue. One by one voices rose. Ships turned their weapons not on the Wanderer, but on the Empire's fleet. The stars lit with rebellion, the first sparks of war, the first cries of resistance. Worlds that had lived in silence now found their voices. Because one human had chosen not to sell, not to surrender, not to run. Joran's heart pounded as he saw the tide shift. Not victory, not yet, but the beginning. The exile's head fell against his shoulder, her glow fading to a whisper. Her lips brushed the single word once more. Free? Joran's throat tightened. His eyes burning, he tightened his grip on the controls, guiding the ship through the chaos. Around them, raiders fell, warships reeled, the galaxy waking from its chains. The Wanderer was breaking apart, but it still flew. It flew because they refused to stop. The enemy commander shouted again, his words lost in the storm. Joran silenced the channel, his voice steady. No empire lasts forever. Another blast shook the hull. Fire ripping through the cabin. Joran held the exile tighter, her skin cold but her fire still alive inside her eyes. They had started something no one could end. The galaxy would never be the same. The stars ahead burned brighter than before. Not just fire, not just war, but hope. Hope carried on the voice of truth. Hope born from one choice. Joran laughed bitterly through blood and smoke. All this, he muttered. For a set of clothes, the exile stirred weakly, her lips curling into the faintest smile. Her hand pressed to his chest, her whisper soft but fierce. Human. The word was not insult. Not command but honor. In her voice it carried weight. Carried trust. Joran's chest tightened, his hand steady on the burning controls. Together they had lit the fire. Together they had changed the stars. The war around them roared, but the Wanderer still flew. Scarred, broken, defiant. Human and exile side by side. The first battle of many. The first strike of a war that would shake empires. The galaxy would remember this moment. Not as the day the Empire crushed a freighter, but as the day humanity fought back.